Hello everyone and welcome to the MS-DOS project. After a long hiatus for my church mission, I'm back and working on videos again. Last time I talked about Ultima III, Exodus, so today I'll be talking about Ultima IV, its history, and my experience with it. Ultima III was a huge success for Richard Garriott and his fledgling Origin systems. However, 1983 was not a good year for the games industry. Because of a number of factors, including market saturation and falling prices of personal computers, there was a massive crash of the video game market in the United States. The market declined over $30 billion in the next year, and this obviously put the fledgling Origin systems in a very precarious position. Luckily for Garriott, the Ultima name carried a lot of weight, and computer games were in a better position than console games after the crash. Ultimately, they were able to weather the crash and emerge as a giant in the PC game development. Before Origin could move on to producing Ultima IV, however, they needed to take some time off. The crunch of not only developing the game, but printing copies, offering technical support, and sending out completion certificates, all while living in the Garriott's garage, took a massive toll on the team. Additionally, Robert, Richard's older brother, had been away from his wife in Massachusetts for a long time, putting a strain on their relationship. They made a deal that they would move the company to Massachusetts for a few years, so that Robert's wife could get a promotion and allow them to all move back to Austin on a more permanent basis. Once the team finally got there, they set up shop in a large house and purchased about $10,000 of electronic equipment, which is about $27,000 in today's money, which was quickly stolen by thieves. The insurance replaced it, but it was stolen again. Apparently New England was going to be a little less friendly than Texas was. As the team was setting up shop and preparing to start development of new titles, the feedback from Ultima III started to pour in. The first and most major point of contention was the cover art, which certain groups took to be demonic, putting Ultima and Garriott on their, hit list with Dungeons & Dragons. The second and far more concerning piece of feedback was how players were beating the game. Because of how the previous games were built, not only was it possible to be a mass murderer and thief, but it was actually the easiest way to beat the game. These pieces of feedback really shifted Garriott's MO moving forward with the series. Together with Roe Adams III, who had helped write the manuals for Ultima III, Garriott devised a system that would monitor how players treated other characters and reward them for their good behavior. He based the system off the avatars of Hinduism and their 16 virtues, as well as the principles in Frank Baum's The Wizard of Oz of love, truth, and courage. Before there was even a story, the virtue system had been built out. Basically, the three main virtues combine in different ways to create 8 virtues in total, which is best seen as a Venn diagram. The 8 virtues of the Avatar are compassion, honesty, valor, justice, honor, sacrifice, spirituality, and humility. The turnaround for Ultima IV was much slower than any previous Ultima title, taking about 2 full years to produce. This was partially because of the massive changes coming to the game's systems, but also partially because Origin worked on several other titles in the intervening years to keep the company solvent, including popular titles such as Autoduel and Ogre. Despite the long development process, most of the major technical barriers have been solved with Ultima III. Ken Arnold once again provided music for the Apple II and Commodore versions, with Chuck Boucher continuing to help and Dr. Cat finally being able to join the team. The game was released in September of 1985 for several platforms, and despite containing several major bugs as a result of Richard Garriott having been the only playtester, it sold extremely well. It was very well critically received at the time, and with later ports to the NES and Sega Master System, lifetime sales of the game exceeded 400,000 units by 1989. At the time, it was lauded as the best CRPG of all time by several gaming publications, and even to this day it's hailed by critics, with IGN placing it at number 26 of its top 100 role-playing games of all time. Now that all the real-world stuff is out of the way, let's dive into the game itself. Included in the box were a cloth map of the world, a manual that tells about the history of the world and some information, a spellbook, an Ankh necklace, and some various registration and reference cards. The cover artwork is once again masterfully done by Dennis Loubet. The back of the box claims that the game is 16 times larger than Ultima III. We'll see if that really holds up. Of course, the manuals are very well done, as per usual with Origin games. They do a very good job of immersing you into the world while also providing useful gameplay help. The story is expanded upon in the manual titled The History of Britannia, as told by Kyle the Younger. After Ultima III and the defeat of Exodus, there was yet another world-altering cataclysm to the world of Caesarea. Somehow this is not the last one that will take place in this world. As a reaction to this, Lord British felt the need to re-establish the land in a new image, and created 3 strongholds dedicated to the overarching principles that bound the virtues, as well as organizing 8 towns, each dedicated to a single virtue. No big baddie arose this time, but British felt the land needed a hero of the virtues to be an example to the people. This hero would be the Avatar.
Only the Avatar, master of all 4 elements, could stop them.
No, not that one. This avatar would be any person who could master the 8 virtues. Once again, you would answer this call and come to the land, now called Britannia. This setup is very simple, but was a massive departure from the CRPG norms of the day. Instead of trying to defeat a big villain, you're just trying to be a good person and help others out. I played the whole game via the version from GOG.com, which is the MS-DOS version, and is actually available for free. I did, however, use the wonderful Ultima IV upgrade patch, which not only upgrades the tile sets and adds the music back in, but also fixes some bugs that were present in the original release. I'll link to where you can find that below. When you boot up the game, you're greeted with this screen that demonstrates what some of the action and game world looks like. Once you hit any key, you'll be greeted with 3 menu options, which can all be used by hitting that key that corresponds to the first letter. Return to the view just sends you back to the opening screen, Journey Onward continues a previously saved game, and Initiate New Game will start a new one. When you start a new game, you aren't immediately sent to a character creation screen like before, but instead you're an intro you can read through at your own pace. The intro sets up what happens before you travel to Britannia and leads right into character creation. Character creation works entirely different than previous Ultimas, and even most other RPGs to this day. If there's any comparison to it, I would say that maybe the Fallout 3 GOAT test is somewhat similar.
Question 3. You discover a young boy lost in the lower levels of the vault. He's hungry and frightened, but also appears to be in possession of stolen property. What do you do?
Here you meet a gypsy lady in a caravan and are presented with virtue questions, basically giving you 2 options on how to handle a situation based off of 2 of the 8 virtues. There are not necessarily any wrong answers, but the answers you choose will affect what class you are. Every class is associated with one of the virtues, and the manual details which of these classes are associated with which virtues, as well as their abilities, so make your choice wisely. Basically any class is fine, except the shepherds, which are basically useless. Either way, you will have to recruit a companion from each class by the end of the game, so you aren't doomed if you pick a weaker class. Once you finish the character creation screen, you're dropped into the game world near the city that represents the virtue of your class. And that's pretty much all the direction you're given. You're free to approach your quest to become the avatar in whichever way you see fit. However you do it though, you would be wise to seek Lord British's castle first, as talking to him will yield a ton of information on what you need to do. The dialogue system here is much more expansive than in previous games, allowing you to type in keywords to find information. The main ones that you will use are name, job, health, and buy, but you can pick up more from conversation with people. Kind of a similar system to Morrowind's, but you're typing the words instead of clicking on them. You can find all of the information in the game that you need except for one critical piece. Well, mostly, but we'll talk about that later. Asking Lord British about health has him offer you to heal your party for free, which is very nice. He also once again levels up your characters. However, all level ups do is increase your maximum number of hit points. To actually increase stats, you need to visit dungeons and touch orbs, which we'll talk about. Also in the castle is the person you will probably talk to most, at least in the early game, the Seer Hawkwind. When you talk to him, he can tell you how well you're doing at living each virtue, and when you are ready to become a partial avatar in that virtue. More on that in a minute. You'll want to visit him often so you don't waste your time doing tasks that you aren't ready for yet. The structure of the game from here is simple. You need to find several items and locations to be able to complete the game, all while increasing your status with each virtue. Some are simple, like compassion, donate to beggars, and honor, don't attack innocent people, while others are more complicated, such as humility and sacrifice. You also lose points in virtues if you do evil things, such as stealing or attacking innocent people. I think the system is really well designed, especially in that you can't see the number change for the virtues when you do something. You're just expected to do the right things and have to check in with Hawkwind to know your progress. I only have 2 minor gripes with how the virtues work in the game. The first is that some of the virtues are very easy to just cheese up really quickly. For instance, when you visit a healer, if you have over 300 points of health, they ask you if you're willing to donate blood, which knocks 100 hit points off of you. Whenever you do this, it increases your status and sacrifice. What makes it really easy to increase really fast is that there's a healer in Lord British's castle, so you can donate blood until they won't let you anymore, have Lord British heal you for free, and repeat again until you have it maxed out. My question is, how do they even keep this blood? Are they just giving it to sick people right away? Because usually blood has to be refrigerated if being kept for more than a few hours. I don't know, maybe Britannian scientists know more than we do. Anyway, my only other gripe is with humility. I think it's a super honorable attempt and probably the most creative of the virtues, and that it's not super easy to cheese. It's still possible, but it's a little bit harder. But it's really hard sometimes to know how to properly raise it. Basically, select NPCs will ask you certain questions that you have to answer yes or no to, and you're supposed to answer humbly to increase humility. The problem is, sometimes it's very unclear which answer would be the humble one, and even sometimes seems like the wrong one. For instance, this NPC in Britain asks if you are proud, and I thought the humble answer would be to say yes, but if you respond that way, it lowers your humility. Maybe I just don't get it, but I think that's something that could be improved about the virtue system. Once you've leveled up a virtue sufficiently, you need to meditate at the respective shrine. There are just a few problems. You need to know where the shrine is, and the shrine won't even let you in if you don't have its rune and mantra. To find all of these things, you need to go to the cities associated with each virtue and ask people about them and where you can find them. Once locating all the items you need, meditating at shrines for 3 cycles will give you partial avatarhood in that virtue. So most of the early game considers of wandering the world and its various cities to find all the runes, mantras, and shrines, as well as being virtuous. If it wasn't obvious already, this is a game that basically requires you to take tons of notes. And you'll be glad you did. I know I was. When you are in the overworld, there are several things to pay attention to. The first is modes of traversal. The obvious one's on foot, which is pretty self-explanatory. You can purchase horses that increase your speed, and that's about it. You cannot, however, purchase a boat. To acquire one, you need to wait around on the coastlines for a pirate ship to come and attack you, which you can then take. And sometimes you have to wait forever for these boats to show up. Honestly, I don't understand why it was so hard to let you buy a boat. Luckily, the sailing system has been improved for this time, and while wind is still a factor, going in a direction that the wind doesn't favor now just slows you down instead of stopping you outright. There's also a wind change spell which comes in handy all the time. The moon gates also make a return, and in the early game are often one of the easiest ways to travel if you can figure the system out. While traveling, you will notice there are different terrain types. Most of the different terrain types just slow you down and affect the field of combat, while walking through swamps will poison you, so avoid them if at all possible, and if you have to travel through them, keep enough cure spells to cure up your whole party, just in case. While wandering the overworld, you will run into probably the most annoying part of the game, at least for me, the random encounters. I swear there are so many combat encounters, it can almost put an early JRPG to shame. Maybe they stole the idea from Ultima, it did sell very well in Japan. I just want to travel between Britain and Pause, which are fairly close together, and I probably have to go into combat 5 to 6 or more times in that short distance. Luckily, the combat is pretty easy overall, but just to speed it up, it's best to deck out most of your party with ranged weapons as fast as possible. The combat screen remains mostly unchanged from Ultima 3, and it's pretty straightforward, so that makes it a bit less of a pain to have to be fighting all the time. While talking about combat, I might as well address the magic system. While the spells themselves are all really good and casting is simple, it's the preparation for magic that's a little rough. Ultima IV uses a reagent magic system. Basically, you need certain ingredients for each spell in order to be able to cast. By itself, that's not really that big of an issue. You can buy most reagents at herbalists, who all happen to be blind, so be honest when it comes to paying them. The main tedium comes from the fact that you need to mix all of your spells ahead of time by choosing the spell you want to mix and then choosing the proper ingredients. It's mostly just tedious more than anything, but really not all that horrible. But just be prepared when you're entering a dungeon because you might get locked in combat, and if you're in combat, you can't mix new spells up. Once you've attained partial avatarhood in all 8 virtues, you'll be looking towards your final goal, the Stygian Abyss, where the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom is housed. But if you try to go there, you'll find out very quickly that not only is it protected by a pirate fleet and surrounded by lava, but there's just no way to get in. As you meditate at shrines, you will find out you need several things. First off, you need to get 3 items, the Book of Truth, the Candle of Love, and the Bell of Courage, to gain entrance to the Abyss. In addition, you'll need to get the Key of 3 Parts to enter the Chamber of the Codex. The Key of 3 Parts can only be obtained by using Virtue Stones. No, not the runes, these are entirely separate stones for some reason.
Where are the stones?
And no, not those stones either. You need to use those at the appropriate altars in dungeons. The townspeople can tell you where the stones are located, almost all of them in dungeons, so you'll need to trudge through the game's dungeons to locate them. The dungeons here are very similar to an Ultima 3 in that exploring the dungeons is in a pseudo 3D with combat in 2D. This time, however, there are several dungeon rooms that are 2D, and many have puzzles or false gates that need to be solved in order to move in the proper direction. You can use magical gems to see floor layouts of the dungeon, so that really helps a lot to be able to find your way around. You also can still use up and down spells to get around if you need be, as well as a handy exit spell if you really get in a pickle. While we were talking about dungeons, I just want to mention that this tree enemy here, called Reapers, yeah, these suck. They're the bane of my existence. There are tons of dungeon rooms, especially in the Abyss, just chock full of them. And while not all that powerful, they just tend to cast sleep spells every opportunity. So your whole party could be stuck asleep just hearing that annoying sleep spell sound over and over and over for minutes at a time. It's really a pain in the... Speaking of sounds, the upgrade patch adds the music back from the Apple II version. So take a quick listen. While exploring the world in the various towns, you'll probably hear about the Skull of Mondane. Apparently just his skull is so powerful that if used, it can wipe out the entire world. So apparently we didn't clean up after you killed him the first time, so his skull's there. I mean, is his left pinky out there? Can that kill someone? I don't know. That might be a concern in the future. If you do go and find it, you are best off avoiding using it, because if you do, you take a significant hit to each and every one of your virtues. You're best off just chucking it into the lava at the entrance of the Abyss, which boosts your virtues and gives you some experience. After having successfully tracked down the key to the Codex Chamber, as well as the necessary items to open the Abyss, you're almost ready. It turns out that although the enemies in the Abyss look the same as anywhere else, they cannot be harmed by non-magical weapons. So make sure your whole party has magical weapons of some ilk. There's also mystic armor that can be worn by all classes, which, while not a necessity, will make the Abyss much easier, as you won't have to be reviving your whole party the whole time. Once in the Abyss, you wander the dungeon like usual, but there are no apparent ladders. You must visit an altar on each floor and use the proper stone to open the pathway down. After having done this for 8 floors, you'll reach the Chamber of the Codex, which can be opened with a key and keyword you learn from several NPCs. You are then greeted with a quiz? Of course, no better way to end my fantasy RPG than with a test. If you took notes and paid attention to how each of the virtues work, then it should be no problem. The last question, however, is a little bit of a loose thread. You can find out the answer logically through what a bunch of people say, but it was intended to be found in-game. Smith, the talking horse in Paws, was supposed to tell you the answer, but they forgot to add that and thus left that thread unfinished. This won't be the last we see of him, though. Once you properly answer the questions, that's it. You've attained Avatarhood and have beaten the game. There's a bug in the endgame with the Ultima IV patch where the game freezes up before the last screen, the fix for which I have also linked below. Overall, I can see why Ultima IV Quest of the Avatar is considered one of the greatest CRPGs of all time. Not only did it break away from the trends of role-playing games at the time, but honestly it's still widely different than most of the ones being released today. Besides some tedium, I found the game incredibly enjoyable and worth the 25 plus hours I put into it, which yes, easily doubles or triples my time to beat Ultima 3. The game managed to maintain the best parts of Ultima 3, the mystery and exploration, and add a great open-endedness and innovative virtue system to the mix, as well as the keyword dialogue system that will be the standard of the series moving forward. I would recommend this game easily to almost anyone that's able to understand the key command controls. Not only is it a great game, but a critical piece in gaming history. I'd like to thank everyone so much who has supported me over the last year and during the production of this video. I've loved being able to share my thoughts on this amazing series with y'all, and hear not only feedback, but everyone else's amazing Ultimate memories. I'd also like to credit Through the Moongate Part 1 as giving me a ton of information for this video. I think these reviews would be a lot less interesting without those tidbits. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, as it helps my videos get seen by more people, and you can see my Ultima reviews as they come out in the future. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.